At exactly 11:03 p.m., a quiet call came through the county dispatcher's line, just 3 words spoken in a child's trembling voice. Please help us. The operator leaned forward, headphones pressed tighter. Can you tell me your name? Sweetie, a pause. Then barely audible, Emma. I hear people under the house, and then dash, silence. No background noise. No sobbing. Just an eerie emptiness that settled over the call center like a heavy fog dot within 12 minutes. 2 patrol cars were racing down the winding mountain roads toward the old Clayton house. A weathered, half-forgotten structure at the edge of Briar Ridge, listed on public records as a private foster home, but known to locals only as the Gray House. What none of the officers knew that night was this. The little girl who made the call wasn't supposed to have a phone, and she certainly wasn't supposed to know what was buried beneath the house. 7-year-old Emma Rose hadn't spoken a word when she arrived at the Clayton home 8 months earlier. She had been found curled inside a broken-down car at the edge of a supermarket parking lot, her clothes wet, her eyes vacant. The police assumed she was another runaway or a foster system dropout. No one came forward to claim her. She was quietly processed through the system and transferred to the Clayton home, an off-the-books group residence managed by an aging couple, Paul and Margaret Clayton, known more for their paperwork compliance than their warmth. Quiet. Margaret had told the caseworker on Emma's first night, her tone flat. That's good. Quiet children don't cause trouble. But Emma wasn't just quiet. She was observant, and over the months, she had begun to piece things together. There were patterns in the way the Claytons locked the basement door every night. At exactly 9 p.m., the way strange trucks came and went without headlights, the way new children arrived and never seemed to stay long. But no goodbyes were ever said. Emma never asked questions. Instead, she watched and she listened. She kept a tiny spiral notebook under her mattress, wrapped in a sock. In it, she scribbled names and dates, notes she overheard. The other kids thought she was just drawing, but Emma was building a map of people, times, sounds. She didn't understand everything she was seeing, but she knew what fear looked like, especially in the eyes of the older kids like Michael, who was 12 and kind, and used to read to her at night when the others were asleep. One day, Michael was gone. The Claytons said he got placed, but Emma had seen the deep purple bruise on his arm the night before he disappeared. She'd also seen Margaret whisper something to Paul, then watched as Paul took the keys from the hook and went downstairs. Michael never said goodbye. Rising suspense. The night Emma heard it, the night Emma made the call, started like most others. Dinner was a bland stew. The kids ate in silence. Paul locked the front door at 8:45 and told everyone to go to their rooms. Emma didn't. She quietly opened her window, just a crack enough to let the cool mountain air in and enough to hear things better. Around 10:12 p.m., it started again. A low thud, then a dragging sound. She counted 5 footsteps, then silence, then a whisper. She froze, holding her breath. Someone was saying a name. She couldn't make it out, but it was coming from below the floor. Emma waited until she was sure both Claytons were asleep. Then she did something no one ever thought a quiet 7-year-old would do. She slipped out of bed, reached beneath her pillow, and pulled out a small prepaid flip phone, one she had secretly found months ago, hidden in the garden, wrapped in plastic, long discarded. She had been charging it in secret, and tonight, she knew it was time to use it. She dialed the numbers she'd memorized from the library book she'd read. 911. She whispered what she'd heard. Then, just before the line went dead, she whispered something else, something that made the dispatchers' heart stop. They're hurting them. In the dark, by the time Sergeant Rachel Monroe arrived at the property, the lights in the house were all off. A cold mist clung to the windows. No sign of movement. Officer Tony Briggs was beside her. He looked uneasy. You sure this is the place? He asked. Rachel nodded. That's the address she gave. Clayton home. Briggs tightened his grip on his flashlight. I don't like this place. Used to drive by it when I was a kid. Always got the creeps. They approached the front door. Rachel knocked. Silence. Then Margaret Clayton opened the door, her smile forced. Can I help you, officers? Rachel's instincts screamed. Something was off. We got a report of a disturbance. Mind if we take a look around? Margaret's smile faltered. It's late. The children are sleeping. We won't disturb them. Before Margaret could protest further, Rachel had already stepped inside. Emma was hiding in the laundry closet. She heard everything, the officers' voices, Margaret's excuses, Paul's heavy boots thudding down the hall. She knew this was her only chance. Carefully, she slipped out and made her way to the hall. Her tiny fingers gripped her notebook. Tightly she found Officer Monroe, just as the woman stepped toward the back stairs. Ma'am? Emma's voice barely rose above a whisper. Rachel turned, startled. Emma. She nodded. Did you make the call? Emma nodded again, then handed her the notebook. Rachel flipped it open and her eyes widened. Inside were names, times, notes, drawings of the house's layout, a line that said, there's another door behind the pantry wall. Rachel knelt. Beside her, Emma, is someone down there? Emma's eyes glistened. I think. More than one. Asterisk Rachel didn't hesitate. She called for backup by the time 3 more officers arrived, including Chief Howard. The team had located the hidden panel behind the pantry. A trapdoor opened downward, revealing a steep wooden staircase soaked with damp. Flashlights flicked on. Briggs led the way. The stairs creaked beneath their feet. The air turned cold. The silence grew heavier, and then a scream. Faint, distant, but undeniably human. Rachel's heart pounded. She pressed forward. They reached the bottom. A corridor stretched ahead made of stone, with old iron grates and wooden doors. The first door revealed nothing. The second just a dusty cot. The third. Briggs forced it open, and the smell hit them first. Then came the sound, a weak sob. Rachel raised her flashlight and 5 pale faces stared back, eyes wide, chained together. Asterisk the cold damp air and the underground corridor clung to Officer Monroe's skin, as if the darkness itself were trying to pull her in. Her flashlight trembled in her grip not from fear, but from a deep, aching rage she hadn't felt in years. She turned slowly, sweeping the beam over the small, cramped room. The 5 children, eyes wide, skin paled in cry or speak. They didn't flinch when the light hit them. They just watched, as if they didn't quite believe the people standing there were real. Officer Briggs swallowed hard. How long have they been down here? None of the children answered. One girl, maybe 9, opened her mouth to speak, but instead of words, she coughed. It was a dry, hollow sound that echoed off the stone walls. Chief Howard stepped back into the corridor and called for medics. We need stretchers, oxygen, everything. Now. Rachel knelt beside one of the boys and gently reached for his hand. It was ice cold, bruised. What's your name? She whispered. The boy blinked slowly, then turned his head away. Behind her, Emma stood just outside the doorway, still holding her notebook. Her small frame was stiff with tension, but her eyes, those deep, steady eyes, never left the children in the corner. I think one of them is Michael, she said quietly. He used to read to me. Rachel turned back to the group. Michael, she said gently. Is that you? One boy flinched, just barely. Emma stepped closer. Michael, it's me, Emma. I didn't forget you. The boy's lips trembled, and for a moment, nothing happened. Then his chest hitched and he let out a single sob. The others followed, like a dam finally cracking open. Rachel stood up, her throat tight. Get them out, now. While medics carried the children upstairs into the night air, Rachel looked around the room once more. There were no chains on the walls, no visible locks, but it was clear. This place wasn't meant to be found. In the far corner, behind a stack of rotting boxes, she spotted something at a door barely visible beneath a tarp. Unlike the others, it had no handle. She stepped toward it, pulled the covering back, and pressed her hand to the wood. It opened with a creak, revealing a narrow, spiraling tunnel descending further below. Emma, standing quietly behind her, tugged on Rachel's sleeve. That's where the noises come from. Sometimes, at night, I think there's more. Rachel looked down the passage, then back at the girl. You're not going any farther. You did enough, more than most adults ever could. Emma shook her head. I'll wait here. Rachel nodded, then motioned for Briggs. Let's go. They descended slowly, every step feeling heavier than the last. The air was different, here older, full of silence and secrets. The tunnel opened into a chamber that made both officers freeze in place. There were no people inside, but there were things: cots, empty food containers, torn shoes, a wall covered in marks scratched into the concrete. 100 or more. On a nearby table sat an old file folder, yellowed and damp. Rachel picked it up. Names, dates, intake notes, ages ranging from 5 to 14. Somewhere crossed out. She felt her chest tighten. This wasn't just a case of abuse, that this was something systematic. She snapped photos quickly, her mind spinning. Then she turned to leave, when something caught her eye. A photograph wedged into the back of the folder. A group of children among them, and behind them stood Paul Clayton. Only the photo was dated 4 years ago. Rachel's breath caught. That couldn't be. Emma had only been at the house for 8 months. She climbed back up in silence, unsure of what she had just uncovered. When she emerged, dawn was breaking over the ridge. The house was surrounded by emergency lights now. Reporters had already begun to gather. Officers were moving quickly, questioning, securing the property. Emma sat on the porch, wrapped in a blanket. Rachel joined her, folding herself down beside the girl. You did something brave, she said gently. You helped save lives tonight. Emma didn't smile. They're not all saved yet, she whispered. There's still one more. Rachel turned to her, who Emma's voice cracked just slightly. The girl in the attic? Rachel froze. All this time, they had been looking underground, and the truth part of it had been above. Rachel stood slowly, motioning to the officers nearby. Clear the top floor. Now. Briggs looked confused. We already checked just storage, and Rachel cut him off. Search again. Every door. Every panel. If there's an attic, I want to see it. As the officers moved, Emma looked up at Rachel. She told me her name once, she said. Rachel crouched beside her again. Whose name? Sweetie. Emma blinked. Eliza. She says she's been up there for a long time. longer than anyone. Rachel stared up at the creaking roofline of the house. Whatever this was, it was far from over, and if Elisa was real, the story had just begun. Asterisk. The morning sun barely pierced through the thick mist that curled around the roof of Whispering Pines. Its rays stretched weakly across the grounds, giving the old house an almost otherworldly glow. Emergency vehicles still lined the driveway. The air was heavy not just with exhaustion, but with questions no one could yet answer. Rachel stood at the edge of the front steps, her eyes fixed on the house's top windows. One of them, far off in the east corner, had a cracked pane and faded lace curtains that fluttered faintly in the breeze. That's where Emma had pointed. That's where Eliza might be. She didn't know whether to believe it. After what she had seen underground, nothing felt impossible anymore. Still, something in Emma's voice so certain, so quiet made her listen. Inside the house, the top floor was eerily quiet. The creaking of her boots on the floorboards echoed like whispers. Officer Briggs followed close behind, his flashlight cutting thin lines through the lingering dust. Nothing so far, he said, checking the last bedroom on the left. If there's an attic, it's sealed off. Rachel didn't respond. She turned in a slow circle, taking in the wallpaper peeling at the edges, the faded paintings, the single chair beneath a rusted ceiling vent. Then she saw it, a seam in the ceiling, subtle, almost invisible, but there just above the hallways. End was a faint square outline, a trapdoor. She stepped forward, grabbing the wooden chair and dragging it under the panel. Get me something to reach with. Briggs handed her a baton. Rachel tapped the ceiling until the panel gave way with a groan. Dust rained down in a soft cloud. As it cleared, a wooden ladder creaked and slid downward on rusted rails. Rachel climbed without hesitation. The attic was colder than she expected. The smell was of old wood, dry air, and something faintly metallic. The light from her flashlight revealed stacks of forgotten furniture. Boxers labeled with dates from decades past, and in the far corner, something moved. Rachel froze. Hello, she called softly. No answer. She stepped forward slowly. The floor, beneath her groaning with each step, a figure sat hunched near a broken dresser, knees pulled to chest. Long brown hair hung over a pale face. She looked barely older than 10, dressed in what seemed to be an oversized NIGHTGOWN. Rachel crouched carefully. My name is Rachel. I'm with the police. I'm here to help. The girl didn't respond, but her fingers twitched at her side, clutching something an old stuffed rabbit, frayed at the ears. What's your name? Rachel asked. The girl lifted her face, and Rachel felt her heart clench. Eyes too old for her age, shadows beneath them, and lips that hadn't spoken in a long time. Eliza, she whispered. Rachel swallowed. Emma told me about you. At the mention of her name, Eliza blinked, a tear slipping silently down her cheek. I couldn't tell anyone, she said. He said no one would believe me. Who said that? Rachel asked, though she already had a sickening idea. Voice trembled. The man with the gray eyes. He said if I ever spoke, the others would disappear. Rachel's mind raced. Walter Blackwood. He'd always seemed too careful, too controlled, and now pieces were falling into place. Eliza, it's over. He can't hurt you anymore. You're safe. But Eliza shook her head. He's still here somewhere. He never left. He always watches. Downstairs, someone shouted. Rachel stood up fast, turning toward the attic hatch. Eliza, can you walk? The girl hesitated, then nodded. Double quotes. Good. We're leaving together. Rachel helped her to her feet. The sound of something slamming echoed from below. Rachel's radio crackled. Chief, came Briggs's voice, tight with tension. We've got a situation. Rachel pressed the radio to her mouth. Go ahead. He's gone. Blackwood? He slipped the perimeter somehow. Rachel didn't hesitate. Seal the area. Don't let anyone leave. He couldn't have gotten far. She turned back to Eliza. Come on, let's go. But Eliza's eyes were still fixed on the shadows in the attic. He knows the house better than anyone, she whispered. He built places no one else can find. Rachel's stomach dropped. This house so old, so full of hidden rooms and sealed doors, was more than just a foster home. It had become a trap, a maze. Back on the front lawn, the children gathered under warm blankets, medics checking them one by one. Emma stood apart from the group, her gaze trained on the house. She looked up as Rachel and Eliza descended from the front door. You found her? She said softly. Rachel nodded. Thanks to you. Elisa looked at Emma for a long moment, then took a step forward. I heard you, that night. Your voice? Emma smiled. I knew you were there. The two girls embraced, fragile and strong at once. Rachel exhaled, finally allowing herself to breathe. But even as she looked around, the flashing lights, the gathered reporters, the officers moving in tighter circles, she knew this wasn't over. Walter Blackwood was still out there, and something told her he wasn't done. Asterisk. The rain started just after dusk. Light at first, then heavier, soaking the already silent grounds of Whispering Pines. It was as if the skies themselves were trying to wash away the dark history that had just come to light. Yet for Rachel, standing beneath the porch overhang, notebook in hand, and thoughts racing, it felt like the storm was only beginning. The children had all been relocated to temporary Housing under the care of emergency foster services, Eliza was safe. Emma never left her side. And Eleanor Jenkins, shaken but resilient, was assisting detectives with every detail she could recall. Still, one name remained like a cold wind whispering through every room. Walter Blackwood. He had vanished like smoke. No trace of his departure, no footprints in the woods, no vehicle seen leaving the grounds. A man so meticulous that he left no hint of panic, that terrified Rachel more than anything. He hadn't run because he was afraid, he had run because he had a plan. Inside the Whispering Pines library, Rachel revisited the hidden corridor behind the bookcase. The air was thick with mildew and memories. Officers had already cleared the lower basement and discovered 2 more rooms, previously unnoticed, one filled with records dating back to the 1970s. The other eerily bare, save for a single light bulb and bolted chains affixed to the walls. Rachel flipped through Blackwood's old logs, journals, anything that could give a clue. Her fingers landed on a loose page, tucked into a 1983 building inspection folder. Room 6B sealed. No access without master key. Status? Incomplete. There was no room labeled 6B on any of the building's blueprints. The thought struck her, like lightning, if Walter had built secret spaces in the house, could he have also built exits? She called Briggs immediately. I need the original construction records, full schematics, especially from the East Wing. An hour later, the team unearthed a blueprint from the town archives showing the East Wing as it stood in 1902, when the house was first built as a private estate. There, just beyond the old conservatory, was something not present in modern layouts. A storm tunnel. It connected the estate to a creek nearly a mile into the woods. Rachel's pulse kicked up. Blackwood hadn't escaped the house. He'd escaped through it. The search intensified. Officers with dogs combed the forest. Drones scanned from above, but the rain made tracking almost impossible, and Rachel couldn't shake the feeling he was still nearby, waiting. That night, she stayed back alone. The children's rooms were empty now, but Rachel walked the halls, trying to understand how a man like Walter Blackwood could fool so many for so long. She paused outside the attic door, the same one she had opened to find Eliza. She climbed the steps again, this time slower, the weight of the silence pressing against her. At the top, she saw something new. A folded note. It sat squarely in the middle of the attic floor, too precise to be accidental. Rachel stepped closer, every instinct on alert. The note was written on yellowed paper, the kind used in the home's old stationery. Her name was written across the top in firm block letters. She unfolded it carefully. Truth lives in silence. Follow the breath of the house. No signature, no explanation. Rachel read the line again. It sounded like a riddle, but something about the word breath echoed in her mind. She thought back to Eliza's words. He built places no one else can find. Rachel walked slowly along the attic walls, pressing against them, listening until she heard it. A faint hiss. Like air, like a breath. She crouched near a panel, hands brushing over the floorboards until one moved under her palm. A square, loose enough to shift. With effort, she pulled it open, revealing a narrow tunnel, barely wide enough to crawl through. She hesitated, heart thudding. But then she thought of Emma, of Elisa, of every child whose eyes held more fear than any child should carry. She took a breath and crawled inside. The tunnel was cold and silent. The walls rough and unfinished. She moved slowly, guided only by the beam of her flashlight. 20 feet in, the space opened into a low chamber with stone walls. And in the center, something glint-ed metal. A chair bolted to the floor. And on the chair, shackled and motionless, sat a figure. Rachel's breath caught, but it wasn't Blackwood. It was a mannequin dressed in his coat, his hat placed carefully on its head. A distraction? A warning. Pinned to the figure's chest was another note. You're getting warmer? Suddenly, the flashlight flickered. Rachel turned just as a noise behind her echoed through the tunnel. A whisper, or a breath. She wasn't alone. The tunnel went silent again. That kind of silence that presses against your ears, thick, unnatural, alive. Rachel's flashlight stuttered once more, then steadied, casting long, crawling shadows along the stone walls. Her breath slowed, but her heart refused to follow. She wasn't alone down here. She turned slowly, careful not to scrape her boot against the ground, and aimed the flashlight back toward the entrance. Nothing, no figure, no sound, yet every part of her instincts, her training, her soul told her someone had whispered her name in the dark. It had sounded like a child. She faced the mannequin again, the note still pinned across its chest. You're getting warmer. Rachel studied it more closely. The coat's inner pocket was slightly bulging. Reaching in with gloved fingers, she pulled out a second folded slip of paper, this one torn from a modern notepad. The handwriting was rushed, almost frantic. The roots grow deep. The house remembers. Beneath the stone, the last one sleeps. Rachel exhaled sharply. This wasn't just a cryptic message. It was a direction. She pulled her map of the original Whispering Pines layout from her pocket and traced her finger to the east corner, the oldest part of the house. The stone cellar, used a century ago for coal storage. The tunnel she was in seemed to slope in that exact direction. She moved forward. The tunnel narrowed again. forcing her to crouch as she passed through a jagged break in the stone wall. Beyond it lay a chamber she hadn't expected, a domed room with cracked stone walls and a single oil lantern hanging from a rusted nail. It swayed ever so gently, though there was no draft, no wind. In the center of the room, someone had laid out toys old dusty, arranged in a perfect circle, a cracked porcelain doll, a wooden train with faded red paint, a puzzle missing half its pieces, each one labeled with a small strip of masking tape, each with a name. Rachel crouched, her flashlight trembling now, and read them aloud. Jacob, Marla, Annie, Luis, Kara, 5 names, all matching the 5 children who had vanished from nearby towns over the past year. And at the center of the circle, placed carefully and deliberately, was a 6th toy, a stuffed rabbit, pristine new, its tag still attached. She flipped it over. Elisa. Rachel's breath caught. Eliza was alive. She had been found. But this meant she had been chosen. The rabbit was more than a toy, it was a message. Rachel backed away slowly, nearly stumbling as she turned to leave. But then she noticed the wall behind the toys lined with small, uneven stone bricks. One stood out, cleaner, newer. She tapped it. Hollow. Rachel pulled out her multi-tool and began prying. It took nearly 10 minutes, her hands aching, but finally the brick gave way, revealing a tiny hand-dug cavity. Behind it, inside, she found what looked like a logbook, not typed, handwritten. Every page, dated and organized. Details about each child, where they were taken from, how they were kept hidden, what they liked to eat, how they reacted to being isolated. It was meticulous, and at the bottom of each entry, a signature in bold block letters, W.BLACKWODE, had documented everything. Rachel flipped to the last page, expecting another name, another date, but instead, it read something entirely different. One escaped, too clever, too aware, watched me, followed me, heard too much. She remembers, I must return for her. Beneath it, the date of Eliza's escape, and below that she knows where the last door is. Rachel didn't even realize her hands were shaking until the light flickered again. But this time, the flashlight didn't recover. It went completely dark. In the pitch black, something scraped against the stone. A deliberate sound, something or someone moving just outside the chamber. Rachel reached for her backup light, switched it on, and the beam illuminated a shadow disappearing into the side tunnel she had just come through. He was still here, not gone. Not vanished. Hiding. And now, he knew she was getting close. She scrambled back into the tunnel, heart pounding, trying to remember every twist and turn. Her only goal now? Get back to the surface, warn the others, and protect Eliza. But as she crawled, faster now, a new thought struck her. What if Eliza did know where the last door was? And what if she hadn't told anyone? Because she was waiting for someone to find it first. Rachel burst through the rotting floorboards of the Whispering Pines East Wing, gasping for breath. The dawn light spilled through the tall, cracked windows. But instead of comfort, it painted the abandoned halls in haunting gold. Her knees were scraped, her uniform caked in dust and blood from a gash she hadn't noticed. But she didn't stop. She couldn't, because somewhere above, in the children's dormitories, Eliza was awake, and someone else might be watching her. Rachel didn't take the main stairwell. She bolted for the servant passage, instead the one Eliza had shown them. During that first panicked search, the one no one else believed mattered. But Eliza had insisted. There's another door, she'd whispered. Not the one in the basement. The real one. It's upstairs. It watches. Rachel reached the second floor, heart pounding. She moved fast, ignoring the screams in her legs. Her flashlight beam darted across the hallway. Every door looked the same: edged wood, rusted knobs, peeling paint. But one stood out, not for its look but its feel, cold still. The air outside, it seemed wrong. She pushed it open. Inside was a small attic room, dust swirled in shafts of light. And at the far end, tucked behind an old cot and broken dresser, was a child-sized desk. On top, Eliza's journal, the one she hadn't had with her when they found her. Rachel flipped it open, and there it was. A map. Drawn in crayon, but disturbingly accurate. Stairs, tunnels, hidden corridors, and at the center a room, labeled only the Watcher. Rachel stared. At the center symbol, not a door. A mirror, a square, carefully drawn, with jagged edges on all sides. She turned to the wall, the map suggested. A wooden vanity stood there, the mirror shattered down the middle. Someone had tried to destroy it, but behind the broken reflection, something glinted. Rachel stepped closer. The cracks in the mirror didn't just break, they formed a pattern. Letters: don't trust the man who smiles. She inhaled sharply, Walter Blackwood's grin, that tight, practiced smile. The only thing colder than his stare. Suddenly, the mirror creaked. Rachel stepped back as the center cracked further, and then, slowly, opened. It didn't swing, it slid sideways, revealing a perfectly square doorway behind it. No dust, no cobwebs. Recently used, Rachel radioed her team. Voice urgent. I found something. Attic room, East Wing. Bring back up now. Then she stepped through. The space inside was low-ceilinged and dim. A single bare bulb flickered overhead, and lining the walls photos, dozens of them. Children, all of them from the home. Candid moments, sleeping, reading, laughing, but taken from odd angles through vents. Behind door frames, sometimes at night, there were annotations under each photo. Behavioral notes, weaknesses, fears. Then she saw the newest picture, Eliza, taken just days ago, in her recovery room, smiling, trusting, and beside it, a list, dates, times, entries labeled observe, extract, replace. Rachel's stomach twisted. This wasn't just about hiding children, someone was studying them, preparing, and them for something. Her hands shook as she snapped photos with her phone. Every file, every note, evidence behind her. Something moved. Rachel spun. And there he stood, Walter Blackwood. His uniform was gone, replaced with a plain black coat. His hair unkempt, his face pale, eyes darker than she'd ever seen them. But what chilled her most was his calm. I was hoping you'd be the one to find it, he said. Rachel stepped back slowly, hand on her weapon. It's over, Walter. I know everything. You know nothing, he said softly. They never wanted rescuing. They were chosen. He took a step closer. Rachel drew her weapon, voice steady. Don't move. He raised his hands, unafraid. This isn't about me. It never was. I'm just a gatekeeper. Rachel blinked. What? Walter's gaze drifted to the photos. They're not like the others. You've seen it, Eliza especially. What she knows, what she sees. Rachel hesitated. The way Elisa described her. Dreams. The things she'd drawn. Things that hadn't happened yet, until they did. I don't think, Walter said. I know. He turned slowly toward a hidden panel behind the wall of photos. The door opens tonight, just like it did the last time, before they closed it, before they hid them all away. Rachel advanced. Slowly. What's behind the door? Walter smiled. You'll see. And he lunged it at her, but at the panel. Rachel fired. Not at him, at the ceiling. The shot echoed like a THUNDERCLAP. Walter stopped, startled, just as backup stormed in behind her, guns drawn, shouts filling the hidden room. Walter was taken into custody. Rachel walked out into the daylight with Eliza's journal pressed to her chest and the evidence secured. But nothing felt like victory. Not yet, because Elisa's final journal entry replayed over and over in her mind. He's not the only one who watched as another door, one even he never found. It waits. It remembers. It wants us back. Rachel looked up at Whispering Pines one last time, and felt, just for a second, like something inside was still watching her.